Human relationships, whether romantic or transactional, are rooted deeply in biology. When we speak of contracts for love and money, we are not just referring to legal agreements or social constructs. We are speaking about neurological patterns that shape how we connect, commit, and respond to each other. At the heart of both love and financial exchange lies the same machinery: trust, reward anticipation, and risk evaluation, all governed by a complex interplay of neurochemicals and brain circuits. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone because of its role in building trust and attachment, particularly in romantic and close social relationships. When two people fall in love or even share consistent, vulnerable moments, oxytocin levels rise, reinforcing emotional connection. This biological reinforcement operates almost like a contract and neural agreement that says, this person is safe, familiar, and important. However, this same chemical can cloud our risk evaluation. Elevated oxytocin can reduce amygdala activity, which typically alerts us to danger. So, in love, we may overlook red flags, convinced of the other's trustworthiness simply because our biology says so. On the other side of the spectrum, financial decisions are largely influenced by dopamine pathways. Dopamine drives the pursuit of goals, rewards, and novelty. In the context of money, it fuels ambition, risk-taking, and the anticipation of future gain. But dopamine is not confined to financial matters. It also plays a crucial role in romantic pursuit. Early-stage romantic love, in particular, is marked by intense dopamine spikes, akin to what one might experience in gambling or high-stakes investing. The same anticipation-reward loop that draws us toward a financial opportunity also fuels our attraction to others. What's fascinating is how these two systems, oxytocin-driven attachment and dopamine-driven pursuit, interact. When aligned, they create stable, fulfilling relationships or partnerships where emotional connection and shared goals reinforce each other. But when they clash, problems emerge. For example, a relationship might offer deep emotional bonding but lack the novelty and growth that dopamine craves, leading to restlessness. Or, in financial collaborations, trust might build slowly, especially if dopamine-driven risk appetite outpaces the oxytocin-based trust circuits, causing tension or mistrust. Cortisol, the stress hormone, also plays a significant role in both love and money. Chronic stress in relationships, especially those involving financial instability, can trigger heightened cortisol levels, impairing memory, reducing empathy, and disrupting emotional regulation. This creates a feedback loop where biological stress responses erode the very foundations of connection and collaboration. Interestingly, high cortisol can dampen oxytocin release, making it harder to bond or repair trust after conflict. The brain does not distinguish sharply between emotional and financial contracts. Both are processed using overlapping circuits involving the prefrontal cortex, limbic system, and striatum. These systems weigh future outcomes, compare risks and rewards, and evaluate trustworthiness. Whether deciding to move in with a partner or to co-sign a mortgage, the brain processes these moments as high-stakes events involving personal investment and vulnerability. Contracts, legal, spoken, or implied, act as tools to reduce uncertainty and manage the inherent risk that these high-stakes exchanges pose. Predictability is one of the most stabilizing forces in human life. It brings safety, structure, and the ability to plan for the future. In relationships, predictability means knowing that someone will be there, that certain behaviors are consistent, and that shared values guide decisions. From a neurobiological standpoint, predictability lowers activation in the brain's threat detection systems, particularly the amygdala. When we know what to expect, our bodies relax, stress hormones decrease, and we experience a sense of control. This is why rituals in relationships like daily check-ins, shared meals, or consistent bedtime routines can feel so grounding. They reduce cognitive load and create a rhythm that fosters attachment. But passion, as the brain understands it, thrives on the unpredictable. Passion is linked to novelty, surprise, and reward anticipation, neural states largely driven by dopamine. Unlike oxytocin, which reinforces connection through repetition and familiarity, dopamine surges in response to the unknown. It activates the brain's seeking systems, making us alert, engaged, and motivated to pursue. This explains why the early stages of love feel electric. We don't fully know the other person yet, so each interaction feels like a discovery, a possibility. There's tension and uncertainty, and it's precisely this unpredictability that fuels excitement and intensity. The paradox is clear: what the brain craves for long-term security and what it seeks for intense desire often live in tension. As relationships grow more predictable, the very conditions that produce emotional safety can diminish the neural ingredients for passion. The brain adapts to regularity. Novel experiences become familiar, and dopamine levels taper. This is not a flaw in the relationship. It's a feature of how the nervous system learns and conserves energy. Familiar partners activate less of the brain's exploratory and reward-seeking pathways over time, which is why passion often fades in long-term bonds unless effort is made to reintroduce novelty. Financial systems show a parallel. Predictable income or savings offers a sense of safety, while riskier investments offer the thrill of potential reward. In both love and money, we constantly manage this trade-off between stability and stimulation. The brain is constantly calculating, is it worth the risk? Do I want certainty or do I want intensity? Managing this balance doesn't mean choosing one over the other. It means recognizing that they live on different timelines. Predictability builds over time through repetition and mutual investment, while passion requires disruption of routine and carefully introduced novelty. In romantic relationships, this might mean planned spontaneity, travel, new experiences, or even shifting emotional dynamics through deeper conversations or vulnerability. These acts re-engage the dopamine circuits without threatening the oxytocin-driven attachment system. In essence, to maintain both love and desire, one must be willing to toggle between safety and exploration. The brain is not wired to hold both states indefinitely, but it can move between them, especially when we intentionally create environments that support both. Understanding this duality at the neurological level can help us navigate relationships with more clarity and compassion, not expecting passion to feel like safety or safety to always feel like passion, but allowing room for both to exist in cycles. Neuroeconomics explores how the brain makes decisions by integrating neuroscience, psychology, and economics. It sheds light on why we often act irrationally in matters involving both love and money, even when we think we're being logical. The central player in this process is the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and value assessment. It acts as the executive of the brain, weighing options, projecting future consequences, and inhibiting immediate gratification when a greater reward lies ahead. However, the prefrontal cortex doesn't work alone. It's constantly negotiating with deeper, more emotional structures like the limbic system, especially the amygdala and nucleus accumbens, which are wired to seek short-term pleasure and avoid pain. In decision-making, particularly those tied to love or money, this negotiation between reason and emotion becomes especially dynamic. For example, the nucleus accumbens, rich in dopamine receptors, lights up when we anticipate a reward, be it a financial gain or the rush of a romantic interaction. This can cause us to overvalue certain choices, pushing us to act impulsively in ways that contradict our long-term goals. It's why someone might blow their savings on a high-risk investment or dive into a relationship that has glaring red flags. The immediate neural payoff overrides the slower, quieter voice of future reasoning. Another key component is how the brain assigns value through a process called subjective utility. Unlike traditional economics, which assumes people make rational decisions to maximize gain, neuroeconomics shows that our sense of value fluctuates based on emotional state, social context, and even time of day. A financial opportunity might seem thrilling in the morning and terrifying by evening. A partner's behavior might feel loving one day and suffocating the next. This inconsistency reflects how the brain recalibrates reward pathways based on internal and external cues. Hormones like cortisol, which spikes under stress, can distort our perception of risk, making safe choices feel uncertain or even threatening. Similarly, serotonin levels, which influence mood and social behavior, can affect how generous or cooperative we are in decisions involving others. In both romantic and financial contexts, the brain often relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts, to make decisions more efficiently. While these can be useful, they can also introduce biases. The sunk cost fallacy, for instance, leads people to stay in relationships or investments simply because they've already committed time or money. Another bias, known as loss aversion, causes us to fear losses more intensely than we value gains. This is why people might resist prenuptial agreements or financial boundaries. In relationships, they fear that drawing clear lines implies a potential loss of connection, even if the boundaries could protect both partners in the long run. The interplay of emotion and logic in decision-making is not a flaw, it's a survival mechanism. Love and money both involve vulnerability and investment, and the brain must weigh uncertainty, trust, and future outcomes with limited information. By understanding how these neural systems work, we can become more aware of the patterns that drive our choices, creating space for reflection before reaction. Transparency and boundaries are essential mechanisms through which humans create psychological safety and reduce ambiguity in relationships, whether romantic or financial. From a neurological perspective, uncertainty activates the brain's threat detection system, primarily the amygdala, leading to increased stress, vigilance, and a tendency to assume the worst. This is a survival mechanism that evolved to help us detect danger in unpredictable environments. However, in modern interpersonal dynamics, the same system can be triggered not by physical threats, but by vague communication, unmet expectations, or unclear emotional or financial agreements. Transparency in this context acts as a calming agent. When people know what to expect, when intentions are clearly stated, and when terms spoken or unspoken are laid bare, the prefrontal cortex can more effectively regulate the emotional responses generated by the limbic system. This integration between emotional and cognitive centers is what allows us to feel secure, make better decisions, and build trust over time. Boundaries operate in a similar way, offering structure and predictability. Far from being barriers to connection, healthy boundaries are frameworks that define where one person ends and another begins, enabling both autonomy and interdependence. Neurologically, boundaries reduce cognitive load. When individuals know the limits of behavior, the scope of responsibilities, or the expectations around money, time, or emotional energy, they no longer have to constantly scan the environment for social cues or worry about overstepping. This frees up mental resources, allowing the brain to focus on collaboration, empathy, and creative problem solving rather than defensive self-protection. In romantic relationships, a lack of transparency often leads to assumptions that can become emotionally costly. The brain dislikes gaps in information and will attempt to fill them with its own narratives, often shaped by past experiences and emotional biases. If a partner withdraws emotionally without explanation, the other person's brain may interpret this as rejection or betrayal, even if the withdrawal was due to unrelated stress. Transparent communication explaining emotions, needs, or changes in behavior helps neutralize this threat response, keeping both people aligned and reducing the likelihood of reactive conflict. Financial relationships follow the same principles in business partnerships or within families. Unspoken expectations about money are one of the most common sources of tension. When financial boundaries are not clearly articulated, who pays for what, how decisions are made, what financial goals exist, people are left to operate on assumptions. This not only creates confusion, but also heightens the emotional volatility around money, a domain already deeply tied to survival instincts and self-worth. Financial transparency, even when it reveals uncomfortable truths, allows for more accurate calibration of expectations and choices, engaging the brain's reward systems through fairness, clarity, and mutual respect. Transparency and boundaries also reinforce trust through consistency. The brain keeps track of patterns over time. It remembers whether someone has shown up, told the truth, followed through, or respected limits. Each time an agreement is honored, dopamine and oxytocin are released, reinforcing the positive emotional association with that person or partnership. When agreements are broken or boundaries violated, the brain treats it as a breach of safety, often reacting with heightened cortisol, emotional distancing, or withdrawal. This makes it harder to repair the bond unless transparency is used to reestablish a shared sense of reality and control. Social scripts are the internalized instructions we carry about how relationships, love, and money should function. They are formed early in life through family dynamics, media exposure, culture, and peer influence, and they shape the unconscious expectations we bring into adult interactions. These scripts are not just abstract ideas, they are physically encoded in the brain through repeated experiences that solidify neural pathways. Over time, these patterns become automatic, influencing how we interpret behaviors, react to conflict, and make decisions in both romantic and financial domains. The brain tends to prefer predictability, and social scripts offer a kind of shortcut and efficient way to make sense of complex social situations without having to consciously evaluate every interaction. The problem is that these inherited scripts are often outdated, rigid, or mismatched with our current values and environments. In the context of love, a common script is the notion that true love is unconditional or that real intimacy requires complete emotional merging. This can create unrealistic expectations that a partner should automatically understand needs without communication, or that compromise is a betrayal of authenticity. Such ideas may originate from idealized portrayals in movies or inherited beliefs from family dynamics where emotional sacrifice was mistaken for love. From a neurological standpoint, the expectation of unconditional connection activates reward circuits, but when unmet, it can lead to intense feelings of disappointment, betrayal, or shame. This is because the brain interprets violations of its script as threats to identity or belonging, activating the limbic system and increasing emotional reactivity. With money, the dominant cultural script often emphasizes independence, competition, and quantifiable success. Financial worth becomes intertwined with self-worth, and collaboration around money, especially in relationships, can feel threatening if it challenges the script of personal control or success. People conditioned to view money as a private, individual domain may struggle to build shared financial systems in romantic partnerships. They may unconsciously avoid transparency, resist financial planning, or equate compromise with weakness. These responses are not purely logical, they are reflexive, emotionally charged reactions shaped by deep-seated conditioning. The brain forms protective strategies around money early in life, often based on how scarcity, abundance, or financial conflict were modeled during childhood. Another powerful script is that romantic and financial decisions are separate. Many people compartmentalize these aspects of life, believing love should be driven by emotion and money by logic. But the brain does not divide them so neatly. Emotional states heavily influence financial decisions, and financial security significantly impacts emotional well-being. The circuits involved in reward, risk, and trust overlap in both domains. When we unconsciously follow rigid social scripts, we often miss opportunities to consciously renegotiate our values, boundaries, and agreements to reflect who we are now, not who we were taught to be. Rewriting these scripts requires active awareness. It involves observing which responses feel automatic and questioning their origins. This is a neurological process called reappraisal, where the prefrontal cortex engages to reinterpret emotional triggers and update outdated beliefs. Over time, new patterns can be formed, not just cognitively but structurally in the brain through neuroplasticity. When people consciously choose how to approach love and money based on intentional values rather than inherited narratives, they gain agency and flexibility, allowing for healthier, more resilient connections. Longevity in relationships, whether romantic or financial, depends not on static commitment, but on continuous adaptation. The brain is a dynamic organ, constantly reshaping itself through neuroplasticity, and human bonds reflect this same principle. Long-term partnerships succeed when both individuals engage in an ongoing feedback loop, adjusting, responding, and evolving in sync with new circumstances. This process is neurologically driven by the interplay between memory, emotional regulation, and learning systems within the brain. As people grow, their needs, priorities, and emotional triggers shift. Without periodic recalibration, even the most loving or lucrative connection can begin to feel misaligned. The longevity loop, then, is the process of consciously updating shared agreements in response to internal and external changes, rather than clinging to outdated rules that once worked but no longer serve. At the neural level, this loop is supported by the brain's ability to integrate new information and revise existing mental models. The prefrontal cortex evaluates outcomes and makes predictions, while the hippocampus updates memory with context-rich experiences. In healthy relationships, partners reflect together on what's working and what needs to change. This might involve renegotiating emotional responsibilities, adjusting financial commitments, or redefining shared goals. These discussions, when approached with honesty and emotional safety, create opportunities for growth rather than conflict. They keep the brain's reward systems engaged by offering novelty and meaning, two crucial elements for sustained motivation and connection. Emotional flexibility is a key factor in maintaining this loop. When people rigidly cling to fixed roles or expectations, their ability to adapt weakens. The brain becomes more reactive and less curious, often defaulting to defensive patterns encoded in the amygdala and shaped by past experiences. In contrast, open dialogue and shared reflection activate brain regions involved in empathy, such as the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. These areas facilitate perspective taking, allowing each person to update their understanding of the other. This kind of mutual attunement is essential for maintaining trust over time, especially as life inevitably introduces stressors like career changes, health challenges, or evolving family dynamics. Financial longevity relies on the same loop. Successful long-term partnerships, whether romantic or business, are not built on a single financial agreement, but on the willingness to revisit and refine financial strategies together. Income changes, expenses fluctuate, priorities evolve. Couples or collaborators who treat money as a living conversation rather than a fixed contract are better able to stay aligned and resilient. The brain rewards this kind of collaboration with increased dopamine and oxytocin, reinforcing both the bond and the shared sense of achievement. Over time, this creates a virtuous cycle where emotional security and financial clarity support each other. In both love and money, the longevity loop replaces the myth of permanence with the practice of presence. It asks people to show up repeatedly with curiosity and openness, to review not just their commitments, but their internal responses to those commitments. This self-awareness activates the brain's executive functions, allowing individuals to respond rather than react, and to evolve together rather than drift apart.